So this week, I fired up Subway Hell again, and noticed that the levels are pretty basic. There's nothing really going on, just walls, floors, and ceilings. So I decided it was a good idea to dedicate this week to artwork. I plan on stealing a lot of inspiration from Atomic Trail, mostly because that game is where I originally came up with this sort of art style. But before we get into that, if you don't know who I am, I'm Helper Wesley. I've made these games, and I make weekly devlogs. Now let's talk about some art. Starting with Brickwork. The buildings in Atomic Trail had faded brickwork on the edges of the buildings to kind of give them some more definition. So I plan on doing basically the exact same thing here. All I'm doing is taking a grid size, I believe it was 200 by 200, and then breaking it up into brick size shapes, and then just taking the erase tool and hacking off bits and pieces of it. Fading off the edges so that they kind of fade away as opposed to having rigid lines, which will hopefully look nicer. I made a bunch of variations of this so that in the game, it will randomly pick one to display, and that way you'll get a randomized assortment of them. And then before I put the bricks in the game, the light on the train was bugging the crap out of me. So I put everything else on hold and redid that. Now it makes a little more sense. Alright, back to Brickwork. When I went to put the brickwork in, I realized I was away from the game for so long that I'd kind of forgotten how the randomization works. And so I had to take a second to get myself familiar with that again. As they reach the end of the scene, they pop back to the beginning again and then pick a different animation for the brickwork. And that way the screen is kind of wrapping back in on itself, and every time it comes through, it's a randomly picked set of brickwork images. So I got that in, and that definitely helped fill in the space a little bit. But I really like overgrowth in games. In Atomic Trail, it was mostly just seen hanging from windows and things of the buildings, and it wasn't really taking a big chunk of the visual real estate. But in a Subway, I feel like we could do something with that. So I started making some hanging moss sprites just by making triangles and then applying a pixelation filter to them and following that up with the Gaussian blur, just enough to blur the edges and give it a pixel look as opposed to a faded look. And then again, I came up with a few different variations of that so that it's not all the same thing. Then I tossed them into the game, put them up hanging from the covers specifically because those don't disappear, regardless of what animations are picked or whether or not you use a bomb to blow them up. So it was a good place for me to shove the hanging moss. And then we managed to get something that looks like this. So we're definitely getting there, we're filling the level up, but now I figured we should get some hanging lights. Some actual things that look like they should have been in the subway before it was ruined. So I whipped up some very basic hanging lights, one that was fully intact and then a couple broken variations of it, and then one that had nothing at all. So the RNG could pick any of the broken or intact version, including the one that wasn't there, so sometimes they just wouldn't show up. And then I put these in game right in the center of the floor tiles because they overlap a little bit. The only one that doesn't work with that is when the entire floor is missing. And basically with that I set it so that if the hanging light is not in collision with the floor, then it sets its animation to the one that's not there. And that way whether the RNG picks that from the beginning, or if you blow up that segment, the light will turn to the fourth animation, which is nothing. The last thing was an attempt to put things on the ground, which I started off making some terrible artwork for like garbage bins and things, and then I wasted a whole bunch of time trying to make like the chain link garbage bins. You might have seen them around. It was all rubbish. It was all a waste of time. I wasn't happy with any of it, so I threw all that out and just went for overgrowth on the floor as well. So the same thing I did with the hanging light, I did with the overgrowth. So it could be anywhere on the floor, basically. It could spawn anywhere in the floor, but if it's not in contact with the floor, it means the floor is not there anymore, which means it sets its animation to the last animation, which is a null animation, which means it's not there, or at least the character can't see that it's there. So after all that art got put into the game, this is what the new tunnels segment of the game looks like. And I said this segment of the game because there's also the city hubs, which we haven't touched yet. But before we get there, I have to talk about some images I shared on Twitter, and I had put those images in GIMP to adjust the lighting to try to get some cool marketing material, actually. After posting them up, I thought they were really cool looking, so I tried to get something similar in color, and so I ended up getting this purple light with a pinkish hued center. And since I've essentially decided that the lights in this game, at least the lights that can scare off ghosts, will be the souls of the dead pets, because that's not cheesy. But because I made that decision, I've essentially decided that the train's light is just a light. Any lights that will be just lights, things that will just show the area, will be plain white. And then these torches, which we'll see in the city hub later, will have color to them, based on the type of animal that's in the torch. And now that the tunnel segment is officially done, art-wise, I think, we'll move on to the city hub. The city hub, again, is blank. We haven't touched it at all. It essentially has one store on the top level and one store on the bottom level, and the rest of it will just be filler, with RNG decorations and NPCs. So the NPCs won't be randomly generated, like the art won't be randomly generated, but I'll put them in the scene, and then RNG will decide which ones will actually be there that time you go in. So I started by slapping all of the decorations we just made for the tunnel segment and put them into the city hub scene. That was obviously pretty quick. Copying and pasting is not that hard. But then I decided I should have a couple more lights in the city, because this is where people are congregating to, and it's because they have these lights protecting them. So instead of making them all torches, like the mother's torch is, these are put into hanging lights, which I made in GIMP pretty quickly. I just threw together a ball and then made a chain on top of it. Nothing fancy. But they'll be hanging from the ceiling as permanent fixtures to imply that they don't move around like the mother and her children do. Once I added the lights in, I was really happy to see that it kind of came together. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. Then I needed to fill the city up with people. NPCs need to be in the city, otherwise it's not a city. So just like the wind I stole from Atomic Trail, I'm about to go steal the characters too. Because like I said, I've spent time working on them, why would I do it again? So I took those characters and started adding animations to them. Nothing complicated, just really basic animations. Like a little bobbing up and down effect, or adjusting their backpack, or looking around, or things like that. And not to speed through the last bit of the video, but I forgot to get footage of animating these characters. So here's what I ended up with. I'm pretty happy with it, actually. I think I might zoom in the camera to the main character and have the camera follow them so you get more detail as you go through. Right now it's pretty zoomed out, which is fine in the tunnel segment because you're meant to be able to see the whole screen so you can jump around. But in the city, there are more things to see and do, and I feel like just being zoomed in just a little more will make it a more impactful experience being in the city. And at some point I'll add in functionality where you'll be able to interact with all the characters, not have dialogue trees or anything, but you will be able to walk up to a character and interact with them, so they'll give you a one-line phrase or something, as well as being able to interact with the shopkeepers, of course, to buy things for your train. The artwork isn't anything crazy, it's all very basic stuff, but comparing the before with the after, it's a very clear improvement. Anyhow, I hope you all enjoyed that devlog, and if you did, maybe click on that subscribe button. And if you want to talk to me personally, the link to our Discord is down below. It's called the Gamedev Fireside, and it's a pretty chill place to hang out and talk game dev. And if you decide to click on that link, then I will see you there.